Hi, it's Webb from Hi Barr. Thanks for listening to this season of You Had to Be There. We've produced 9 amazing episodes so far, and we still want to know, were you there? Do you know anyone that was at one of these events? If so, we'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch by emailing us or reaching out to us on social media. Our email and social handles are in the show notes, or you can go to highbarmedia.com. We're at Hi Barr Media on all social platforms, and that's spelled HIBARR Media. You can stay up to date with Hi Bar's newest shows and updates from the company in our free weekly newsletter that drops every Friday. The newsletter link is in the show notes, so check it out. I think y'all dig it. That's all I've got. On behalf of the amazing Hi Bar team, thanks again for listening. We really appreciate it. Okay, play our music.
Minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5.
That's one small step for man.
One eyewitness. One major pop cultural event. You Had to Be There uncovers stories that shed light on our most iconic moments.
Like the real enemy.
Each week, a different host takes on the task of finding and interviewing one person within 48 hours who was there, with no idea what their event will be. Come join the ride.
And so they gave me the phone, and it was Melanie Strug, Kerri's mom, and she's almost hysterical. She's like, "John, you can you please help us? You know, I don't know what to do. We have 262 messages on our hotel phone, and it's Good Morning America and the Today Show and nighttime talk shows and book people and agents."
Hi, Julia. It's Webb from Hi Bar. You ready?
Yep, I'm ready as I can be.
Your assignment for this episode of You Had to Be There is to find an eyewitness to Kerri Strug's gold medal winning vault at the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta. Starting now, you have 48 hours to find someone who was there and interview them. Good luck and have fun.
My name is Julia Thompson. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know who I am. I've produced the thing, edited down hours of interviews to bring you these episodes, alongside Webb Barr, Katherine Lieberson, and Vishal Nayak. So, Webb assigned me the iconic moment when Kerri Strug landed a vault on an injured ankle to bring home the gold medal. I was barely a teen when the 96 Olympics happened. The only thing I remember from the games is the pipe bomb that blasted in Atlanta's Centennial Park. A lot of time has passed since the 90s, and gymnastics has totally changed. For one, mental health has become the forefront of the conversation, with Simone Biles dropping out of the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, and of course, the USA Gymnastics sex abuse scandal, where hundreds of gymnasts testified in court that Larry Nassar, a former doctor for USA Gymnastics, had sexually abused them, making them believe it was medical care. It is considered the largest sexual abuse scandal in sports history, resulting in Nassar's life imprisonment. On top of that, the most celebrated coaches of the 90s, Marta and Bella Caroli, fled the country during the scandal. And today it's widely accepted that they inflicted verbal and emotional abuse on their gymnasts that fostered a culture of fear. Many of their gymnasts were members of the 96 team, including Kerri Strug herself. So keep in mind this is 2024, and I'm coming into this event with all that baggage and important history. On its face, it's a little crazy we celebrate someone who was pushed to land on a broken ankle. Or at least that's how I see it, seemingly for the public's entertainment. However, the majority of the gymnastics world and the public at large experience this event as a heroic feat. Was she even pushed? Am I overreacting? The purpose of this podcast is to revisit iconic and inspirational moments in pop culture history through the lens of those who were there. In this sandbox, I will entertain the idea that this landing was an extremely spectacular act of human will, of femme empowerment, and just maybe it was worth it for Kerri and her gymnastics team and the world to witness such strength and talent on the world stage. I call my friend Katherine Lieberson, who was not in attendance at the 96 Olympics, but was a competitive gymnast during that era. who also happens to be Teeny Lieberson's sister, one of the editors of our podcast.
If there was space, I would do at least a handstand or flips. Yeah, flips down the beach. I can't do it anymore.
Really?
I don't think so. I haven't tried since having 2 kids, but I'm pretty sure my body alignment has completely changed and I would maybe break bones.
It seems like a stupid risk to take.
Yeah, seems like a bad idea.
But maybe you'll take that risk at 50 or something, just because you'll be like, I'm on the decline now. Like, I need to prove this.
Sure, maybe.
Maybe you don't know the answer to this, but I am curious, like, where it came from, too, if you know that. So I just looked it up, and it did start with the Greeks, and this is kind of interesting. The Greek word translates to train naked or nude. So they should have just kept the Olympics naked. I mean, the gym, I think they have many more spectators.
That wouldn't have been problematic at all.
Okay. So now, can you talk a little bit about the categories?
Sure. So for it's called women's artistic gymnastics is the formal name, because there's also rhythmic gymnastics, which is the one where they use the ribbons and the clubs and the balls, and they don't do as much acrobatics. It's more like dance with equipment. So women's artistic gymnastics, which is the one that everybody knows. There are 4 events. There's vault, bars, beam, and floor. And then the men's artistic gymnastics, there's slightly different events. They have 6 events. They have vault, floor, and then they have a couple bars events. So they have parallel bars, high bar, and then pommel horse and the rings.
And what did you participate in?
So most gymnasts do everything. Some of the elite gymnasts now are specialists. So they really train mostly on 1 or 2 events because they're really good at those events. And that's how they can get on to an Olympic team, because the head coaches know, like, Sarah's really good at bars and we don't have someone who's as good at bars. So she's going to get on the team just based on her bars events. But most gymnasts do all 4 events, and you compete in the all around, which is the individual. You do all 4 events. When I was competing, it was out of a 10, scored out of a 10. And there was just one score, multiple judges, and then they would average the scores, but you would get, like an 8.5 or a 9.0 or a 9.5. So there's a difficulty score, which is just based on what you do. And then there's an execution score. In a way, it's less subjective because you have the 2 scores, but it's also more subjective because they can sort of award points for how you're doing some things.
So what does Kerri Strug mean to you?
Kerri Strug, that was like the height of my gymnastics career, was the 90s. The National Gymnastics Championships for Canada were held in Halifax, where I lived, in 1990. And I remember going with my mom and saying, I'm going to do that one day. I was sort of just getting into the major competitive level of gymnastics. And then 4 years later, I went to the Canadian National Championships. So that was 94. I wasn't good enough to ever be an Olympian, but that would have been my Olympics. So in 1996, my mom took me to the U.S. Olympic Gymnastics Trials, which is the competition where all the gymnasts compete from the U.S. national team, and they make the selection for 6 or 7 gymnasts that are going to actually go to the Olympics. This was back in the olden times when we just watched what was on television and had to record it on the VHS. And so I had tapes of all these competitions and watched them over and over, and knew everybody's routine by heart. And at that point, there was one competition, and however you did at that competition, that's how they chose the team. So there was a lot riding on what was happening that night.
I'm just going to step in here and give you some context. The 96 Olympic team were known as the Magnificent Seven. The members of the team included Shannon Miller, the all-around superstar of the team, Dominique Moceanu, the gymnast poised to be the next star, Dominique Dawes, the floor mat tumbling ace, Amy Chow, expert at the uneven bars, Amanda Borden, captain and balance beam master, and J.C. Phelps, famous for her consistency and clean lines. And of course, Kerri Strug, the person in focus in this podcast. So in gymnastics, each gymnast has a different coach. So this group of gymnasts were a collection of athletes who had different coaches. Kerri Strug and Dominique Morcianu were exclusively coached by Bella Caroli. However, all of the members of the 96 Olympic team were trained by the Carolis at their ranch just outside of Houston, Texas. I received my assignment around noon and spoke to Katherine for another hour or so, but we'll get back to that part of the interview later. Let's get to the part where I focus on finding my person who is there. My favorite way to dive into this process is to pick up the telephone and cold call people.
ASG, how may I help you?
I explained my assignment. And I was thinking it would be smart to call maybe some gymnastics schools in Atlanta, just because maybe there were, school trips or something like that to go to the Olympics, since it was in Atlanta. I know it's kind of random, but I'm just, would you have any ideas?
So the best I could give you is I can leave your name and number for the owner. She's not in right now.
Okay, cool.
But I can pass that along to her.
Did she go? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
If she had gone, her husband would have known more, but he passed away a few years ago.
Oh,
I feel like he would have gone.
Got it. So what's your name?
I'm Sarah.
Sarah, are you a gymnast?
No, I just work the front desk.
Okay.
All right, well, I will pass that message along to her.
Just 30 minutes later, the owner of the Atlanta School for Gymnastics calls me back.
Hey, this is Stacy. Can I help you?
Hi, Stacy. How's it going? This is Julia Thompson.
Hey there. You're doing a podcast about the 96 Olympic team?
Yeah, and I'm actually looking for somebody that was in attendance.
Well, my husband was very good friends with Shannon Miller's coach, Steve Nuno, and then my friend that was on the national coaching staff, Tammy Biggs, and actually our gymnasts performed in the opening and closing ceremonies, and I never share this with anybody. I can't believe I'm telling you this. I filmed up with the Sears hairdressers, and they did their hair for the 2 weeks they were here. I can tell you this. I know Kerri stays in touch with John Siggers. He's the one that owns the hairdressers here in Tucker. Siggers would be great. Anyway, they fell in love with the girls, and they had all kinds of pictures and videos all over their salon for probably at least a good 6 months after the Olympics, of them doing their hair and stuff.
So did you go to the Olympics?
I did not. We had a lot of teams that worked out at our gym. We had the Hungarian team. Bella Caroli was here with Dominique Dawes, and I'm trying to remember, I think Kim Zemeskel. So I kind of stayed back at the gyms. There weren't enough places for teams to work out, so our gym was like one of the main ones, and they actually did. We still have the sign upstairs that says, stage room 1 or whatever, where they did interviews in our room upstairs.
So you were a big part of where they trained when...
Yeah, I was, but I was more behind the scenes, making sure everybody had what they needed, or did the scheduling for who could work out when and things like that. I also know my CPA that we've had for 30 or 40 years, Marian Dykes, is a good person for you to call. Actually, I will text her and tell her that you're doing a podcast about the 96 Olympics and see if it's okay for you to call her. She's a brevet judge, which means that she can judge at the Olympics and the World Championships.
Do you know if she was at the Olympics or not?
Oh, yes, of course she was, yes.
I tried calling Marianne Dykes, and she was out of the office until Monday, way past my 48 hours, and the front desk person wasn't keen on giving me her cell. I was looking for a new accountant, but I guess it won't be Marianne Dykes. I decided to call John Siggers on the recommendation of Stacy from Atlantic Gymnastics School.
Thanks for calling Siggers. We'll be right with you. Atlanta has so much to offer: shopping, concerts, sports, restaurants, and lots of humid days. Siggers hair products are made for you and Atlanta's humid weather. We'll be right with you. Thanks for waiting.
This is John. May I help you?
Hi, John. This is Julia Thompson calling. I got your information from Stacy at the Atlanta Gymnastics Gym. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I'm making a podcast about Kerri Strug and the 1996 Magnificent Seven at the Atlanta Olympics. And she said that you did their hair for the Olympics.
Well, you know, it was the 1996 Olympics, and the American team was training at a fraternity house at Emory. It was a new fraternity house. Nobody had moved in it yet. That's where they were staying, and there was a gym next door, and that's where Bella was training them. And they had us come over and do the hair, and we became real good friends. And every time they'd come to Atlanta, they'd come see us.
What was that like?
They were just kids. You know, they'd never had the hair done in their life. You know, so it was just treats for them. They couldn't take them out anywhere because they couldn't keep them safe. So the woman that was taking care of them, she agreed that they would let them come here and they get their hair done, and that way they could keep them safe because they just had guards all around us, you know.
Wow, that's incredible. Guards were all around the salon?
Yeah, see, because you couldn't get them out because they were world famous.
Yeah.
You know, so they had a problem keeping them safe.
So did the girls have particular hairstyles that they wanted, or did you kind of help them decide?
No, they didn't know. You know, we had to help them because they were just kids and they weren't old enough to mess with the hair, see, you know, because they were gymnasts.
So hair wasn't the most important thing to them, I guess.
Well, it was after we did the hair. Then they just went crazy about it, see. They got so excited, you know.
Do you remember Kerri at all? Because she had short hair, right?
Yeah,
What do you remember about Kerri?
She was just a tiny little girl and good personality. And I met her family, took them to dinner one time.
Did you go to the gymnastics event?
No.
Just the opening?
Yeah.
And how long has your salon been open?
65 years.
Wow. And do you have more than one location?
No, just the one.
And do you do hair yourself?
Yeah, I do hair, my wife, my son, and my daughter-in-law.
Wow. Are you from Atlanta originally?
No, I'm from a little town in Alabama, Roanoke, Alabama. It's below Anniston, and it's above Auburn.
Yeah. So what brought you to Atlanta?
There was more money here than there was in Roanoke, Alabama.
What got you into hair?
My mother taught me into it. She was a hairdresser.
Do you like it?
Yeah, I got real good at it.
Do you have pictures in your salon of them at all?
I got a picture of all of them, and all of them autographed it.
It's nearing the end of day one. I just sat down and emailed Dominique Dawes' agent, who I had cold called earlier that day. He said she'd be interested, but he was at a funeral, said to email him, and he'd get back to me after the wake. I did some Googling around and emailed the writer of Kerri Strug's biography, John Lopez. And then this photographer I came across, Charlie McCullers, who covered the games. I wasn't too optimistic about emailing folks because people usually take their time to get back to you. So I decided to hit the lines again. What's another approach, Julia? Alice Thacker, Georgia born and raised. I produced and directed a movie back in 2017 with an Atlanta-based company of which Alice was the COO. Long story, but the movie was good. I have two great memories of Alice. One is they flew me to Atlanta to meet the production team, and when I arrived to the airport, before heading over to the office, I accidentally sent her a sexy selfie of me. I thought I was sending it to my then girlfriend. Luckily, once I met Alice at the Atlanta office about 30 minutes later, I was like, okay, she's cool, she wasn't offended, I'm not that embarrassed, and I wasn't even naked, so that's good. The second memory is eating steak and drinking red wine in Montana. Alice is no nonsense and a much better producer than me, as you will soon learn. So I was just calling to see if you maybe knew someone that was there.
Not off the top of my head, but I bet I can find somebody that was there. They need to have been at that Olympic event.
Ideally, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I also know somebody that helped organize the 96 Olympics.
So I might make the whole episode more about that
Okay.
Just the mechanics of putting on the Olympics. But for the purposes of like what the competition aspect of the podcast is that I have to find someone.
You have to get to that. But she might be able to help us get to that person as well.
Amazing.
So she's a friend of my sister's. I literally just texted her and said, like, Bev did the 96 Olympics, right? So I'll wait for her to get back to me.
Yeah,
because,
cool.
she will do that. And then with the 96 Olympics, there was the whole bomb thing.
Oh, yeah, I know.
There's all kinds of stuff.
That's like, I was telling my friend, because I've been talking to a lot of people about gymnastics, but I was like, the only thing I remember is the bomb. And that's so sad.
It overshadowed everything.
So sad.
Absolutely everything. Okay, so what's the timeline? You have to be connected to this person by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Ideally. Okay. Well, yeah, let me go back and forth with her, and then I'll just send a big text message out to friends.
Okay. Alice is on the case. That's good. But now what? It's nearing the end of day 1. I'm the series producer of this whole thing, and a documentary filmmaker. I flip furniture on Facebook Marketplace like nobody's business. I'm supposed to be the one that can do this in my sleep. Maybe I am, and I'm bluffing you. Maybe I'm actually beginning to freak out a little bit. Your guess. I call Teeny with the exciting news.
Hello.
Will you give me 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Listen to this. Hi, Julia. My name is Molly Wyatt. I got your info from my coworker who is friends with your friend Alice. How are you? Per the Alice, my coworker, Trisha, me game of telephone I've been playing, I'm writing with details about a guest on the 1996 Atlanta Olympic episode of You Had to Be There. My mother, Linda Wyatt, CC'd here, has lived in Atlanta since the mid-'80s. In July of 96, she went into labor with my youngest brother. I have 3, but was sent home from Piedmont Hospital because a bomb threat was called in.
Oh, whoa.
Likely by Eric Rudolph. And the whole hospital was evacuated. It turns out it was Brandon Hicks, and a bomb didn't go off there, so 2 false alarms for the price of 1. Anyway, she ultimately gave birth to my brother on July 15th and then went to the gymnastics portion of the games 10 days later. She and my dad were at the finals the entire day, seeing everything from the warm-ups to Kerri Strug vaulting on a broken foot to the medal ceremony. Please let me know if this story fits what you're looking for. Happy to facilitate an interview and coordinate a time for you two to speak. My day job is in publicity. Look forward to hearing from you.
I think the answer is an unequivocal yes.
So Linda Wyatt, the mother of the person who wrote that crazy letter, who is connected to me through a friend of Alice Thacker, the one I had steak with in Montana. Linda, she told me the insane story of literally having the Pitocin drip ripped out of her veins because of this bomb scare that had nothing to do with the actual bomb that went off at Centennial Park. Linda went back to the same hospital a few days later, and bada bing, bada boom, the baby was born. 10 days later, she went to the women's gymnastics finals, and I had landed on my person at the end of day 1. Mission accomplished. The next morning, I checked my email, and it turns out John Lopez, the journalist who covered the women's gymnastics team for the Houston Chronicle and wrote the biography of Kerri Strug, was interested in talking to me. And Charlie McCullers also emailed me back, the photographer who covered the Olympic Games. He was also willing to talk to me. I was able to interview all 3 attendees before my 48 hours was up. The best way for me to tell you the story of Kerri Strug is through the eyes of these 3 people who were there, and Katherine, who was watching on TV. So here, let's start with Linda. So to bring it back full circle, I'm curious, so did that have any impact on you that there was a bomb threat?
I just thought it was somebody trying to get attention. The Olympics are coming. Let's just call a bomb scare. I mean, it was like, let's get out. Let's get out of here safely. Let's get away from this hospital. Let's get home to our kids.
But yeah, you didn't actually think it was a real threat.
The hospital acted like it was a real threat. So I was like, well, based on how they're behaving, then yes, it is a real threat. But you don't have time to think like that. Yeah. I think if you have time to think that you're scared, then maybe there's a lot of some time lapse between, the threat and then the action. And then and I'm thinking the place is going to blow, And I didn't want to get too excited because what if I was really starting to go into labor? So I was trying really hard to be very, very calm. Because where would I go? I'd like have the kid in the parking lot.
Yeah. So you also had to remain calm to protect your child inside of you.
Yeah.
So is your son like a bomb of joy? Is he like a bomb of energy?
Oh, he's wonderful. Yeah, he's wonderful.
So then the Olympics starts like a couple days after.
Right.
And what's the scene like in Atlanta? Do you live like in downtown? Where do you live in relationship to everything that's going on?
We lived in the suburbs.
Okay.
Yeah, we took this old bus, and the Olympic people had weird outfits. They looked like banjo players from the 1890s, but they had like these plastic straw hats on, and then they had like these polo shirts that were green, turquoise, and aqua. And then we took the bus. And so I was like, I've got to take the baby. And the rules were like no children. Everybody had to have a ticket, even an infant. And so I left him at home. We saw the pediatrician. He's like, at the Olympics, he's like, what are you doing here? Didn't you just give birth? And I'm like, yeah, but it's the Olympics. And
you saw your pediatrician at the Olympics.
Yeah. I was just telling my husband what I loved about the Olympics is every time there would be some sort of Russian or East German, somebody from the Eastern Bloc, like would defect. And so it would be so exciting to see, who hates communism and came to the United States?
What are your thoughts on that as a history teacher?
I think it's so cool. Like I grew up in Miami, so we had Cuba right there and communism. And so it just seemed like we had so much anti-communist education that it was like, yes, another victory.
Yeah. It's like the Rocky movies.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to explain to people that didn't live through it. They're like, really? You're like, yes, America, the best country ever. And people are like, huh? I'm like, no, really?
So there was a lot of nationalism happening at the Olympics.
Yeah, but it wasn't nasty nationalism. It was like, we are the best nation, but we didn't have to say it. You could just look at our facility, but nobody was going around doing that. People weren't being rude about it. It was like, this was it. You have arrived. You're in America. This is the best place ever. I don't think it was ever said in a mean way. It was like, of course you'd want to come to the United States. Why wouldn't you want to be here?
Yeah.
Not like, stay away. We don't want you. It's just really more of a welcoming,
Do you think that had anything to do with Georgia, or was that just America?
Oh, interesting. Well, I always thought America was like that. I
don't know. The reason I asked that is just because I've had my experience with people from Georgia has always been very welcoming and warm.
Oh,
so
thank you.
Yeah, that's why I said that.
Well, we had a lot of there was like a lot of training. Be friendly to people, help them out. And then once again, being from Miami, like we had be a friendly Floridian and all these things you had to do to help tourists out. And I like helping people. And so for me, it was like, this is my mission.
Be a friendly Floridian, put on a sunshine grin, put your best foot forward and shake a hand, and make every stranger a friend. Be a friendly Floridian.
Here's John Lopez.
I was a sports writer and columnist at the Houston Chronicle, and my go-to, kind of not a beat per se, but one of my specialties was the Olympics, the quote-unquote Magnificent Seven. That's the team that ended up going to Atlanta. So in 91, they were gearing up for the 92 Olympics, and Kerri got there, I forgot when, but in 1991, and she was 14 years old. She was very well-driven, kind of soft-spoken, kind of shy. Still is, believe it or not. And she ended up making the 92 Olympic team. This was before they changed the minimum age to 16. So she was 15 years old, I believe. She might have been 14 still. But anyway, when they went to Barcelona. So I was at Barcelona covering the Olympic Games. And, of course, the United States hadn't done anything in gymnastics, in terms of team medals and especially gold medal. Her strength was the vault, which obviously would come into play later. But she was doing everything fantastic. And she missed the individual all around. I want to say it was in this neighborhood. I don't know if this is exact, about .04 of a point. like not even a full tenth of a point. I was and I'd known Kerri a little bit, just kind of cordially, and her mom and dad, but not really know them, and we went to the press conferences, and they had all the gymnasts up, on the podium, and Kerri was on like the last or second to last row, just like slumped over, just completely distraught. She thought she was going to make the individual all around. And she was just kind of like tears in her eyes, just, as you can imagine. And so I did the press conference, and then kind of toward the end of it, I got out. I just felt so bad for her. So I got out and I went and sat by her and just talked to her a little bit, because obviously her parents weren't allowed in. I just chatted with her and, tried to say what I could. And then over the course of the next 4 years, I got to know her and her mom and dad, Bert and Melanie, a little better. And so fast forward, she's really taking off. She becomes one of the integral pieces, but not the star of the Magnificent Seven that went to Atlanta, and kind of had all these expectations of maybe they can win a gold medal. Kerri also was the only one that didn't have an agent. All of them were, starting to get commercial marketing opportunities and stuff like that. There's a 2-day team competition. The first day is almost like compulsories. Like you have to do certain things to get certain scores, and then the teams can kind of filter themselves out in order, And then the second day is still the team competition, but each individual can do like their different routines. Like quote unquote compulsories, they all have to have the same elements. Every team has to have, and every gymnast on every team has to have the same elements, at least at some point. Whereas the second day of team competition is you can do your best routine on the beam. It doesn't have to mirror or include elements that other gymnasts do. You can add elements. That's where like the extra points come in. Like if you can complete a trick, so to speak, that others can't do, well, then you're obviously going to have a higher score. So you do whatever you want on the team competition, but it's still a team. The points are still all added up. And Kerri, her strength, that's why she was last on the vault, was the vault and the floor. Like her floor routine was terrific. Her parallel bars was probably her weakest, but she was obviously good.
Okay, so at the end of day one, our gymnasts didn't perform as well as we had expected, right?
No, they performed well, but it wasn't like they were putting anybody in their rearview mirror. You know what I mean? Like the Russians were still... I think the Russians were ahead, actually, going into the day two. If I'd have to go back and look, but I think that's what it was.
Okay, so then we get to day two.
Yeah, pressure's on.
Back to Linda Wyatt. If you have any memories of that night, like were you missing your baby? Like what? Because you were there all day, right?
Yes. My breast hurt so bad because I had not nursed him all day. I was sweating a lot because that's what happens after you give birth. You just like sweat all the weight off. My legs hurt because of all the walking. I was just kind of exhausted, but I was so excited to be there. It was probably one of the best days of my life. It's up there.
Did you have a flag?
No flags. My shirt was a flag. I had a Stars and Stripes shirt on with white shorts. I remember that. I've gotten rid of it. And like had a blue collar with white stars. And I mean, it was one of these things where the whole crowd was riveted because we had... the score would come up and we're like, okay. And so what happens is the scoreboard was set. So you kind of started figuring out how it works. How do they score? And each event, they have like these little flag things and they kind of turn them. And there were people in this horrible Olympic shirts and they're like flipping numbers and stuff. So you could see, oh, they got an 8.3 on that. And so when you're there, you're kind of figuring out what's going on without, the TV guy telling you. And so you're like, oh, okay. And so you just keep watching all around the room. And you're like, oh, over there, that's happening. Oh, this is happening.
You don't get to Google on your iPhone what's happening.
No, you can't. And you're not texting people and you're not doing those stupid selfies. You're actually, and the thing was, I really don't know if music stopped. I don't know if I forget if with the finals here, if it was done, I don't think it was, I think everything was going on at the same time like it normally does. For me, everything stopped because I love watching it.
Here's Charlie McCullers.
Beyond that, if you think back to 1996, from a photographic standpoint, a technological standpoint, it was the transition between film and digital, right? But the digital wasn't very good. The sensors were tiny. The resolution was bad. So 95% of the people that were taking images, and this is baked into my concept of the time too, if all these news agencies and all these reporters are shooting on deadline, and there's a deadline happening every 4 hours, they're embracing the digital technology, like crazy. But there's no one getting quality images because the technology is so bad in 1996 that I said, you know what, I'm going to hopefully be the missing link in the historical value and the quality. So the night of the women's gymnastics finals, I was there with my wife, and we were celebrating her birthday. So I had promised that I would not be working the entire time and try to be, attentive to having fun. I had a great seat. I was on the front row. I was working for a book publisher that had given me incredible seats to every venue and every event for 3 weeks. So I had a great seat, but there's a caveat to it. Typically, in any sporting event, you know where the action is. When you go to a gymnastics event, it's more like a 5-ring circus, right? So events are happening. You have floor events, you have ring events, you have men, you have women, you have the bar, you have the beam, you have floor. Everything's happening all at once. And it's a little confusing, right? Because you've got the music from one event happening, and then you've got the pace of 3 or 4 other events happening simultaneously. So you don't have that spotlit focus for one particular event that's going on. I was in the front row, but I was not in front of the vault. I was on the opposite side of the arena.
Do you remember any of the photos you took that night?
Oh, yeah, I do. I was sitting very close to where the men's rings were being performed and pommel horse. And I remember being amazed at the fluidity and the strength and the movement of all of that, but didn't understand the scoring to it at all. There was not very inspiring light inside this arena. It was just scatter light throughout the whole floor. There were no spotlights or anything like that. I wasn't close enough to get any what I would say were important women's gymnastics. I could only see them from across the arena. So I put on a zoom lens and I put the shutter speed very slow and started recording the grace and the beauty and the movement and the flow. It felt more like ballet in the theater than it did women's gymnastics in the Olympics to me. And I wanted to play up that graceful quality.
Katherine Lieberson.
They were going into the final event, so they had competed on 3 out of 4 events. The U.S. was on vault for their final event, and they were leading the competition. And this was unheard of, and it's taking place in the United States. So it was just this amazing energy in Atlanta. Dominique Milciano was up on vault. She was the second to last competitor. And again, she was this phenom of the sport of the time. She was sort of, everyone thought maybe she'll win the all around. She's going to be the next Nadia. There's all this intense energy around her. All she needed to do basically was land her vault on her feet and do it fairly well, which for her is like a walk in the park. She does it 1,000 times a day. It should be no problem. So she goes up to vault. She's trying to stick her landing, which means landing and not taking any extra steps and sort of having that amazing, perfect moment at the end of the Olympic competition. So sometimes when you're really trying to stick a landing, it's called under rotating. You don't want to have to take steps forward. So sometimes when you're trying to do that, you can actually fall because you don't give it quite enough. So that's what happened to her. She vaults, she falls, which is just this major shock moment. She has 2 tries. She goes again, falls again, does the same thing.
First vault, a 9.750. Now, will she do the same vault?
She'll do the same second vault, and to increase that score, she needs to nail the landing.
Oh, big step.
And you know, Tim, the same problems you spoke of on the first vault happened again.
Missed that. Okay. Roll up. Put that bar. Ready for bar.
Yeah, this is not what Bela Karolyi wants. Obviously, he's looking for near perfection when you're competing at this level, especially gearing up for the games. But look right here, once again, even a bigger angle on the horse. But this is the big problem. Huge hop forward. No way that's going to get a bigger score.
Remember, her first score was a 9.75, so...
And this is basically, you know, for her, this is unheard of. So now Kerri Strug is the final competitor. And in the team competition, you have, I think at the time, 6 people compete, and you could drop the lowest score. So for Kerri, now all she really has to do is land her vaults, because then they can drop Moceanu's score, win the team competition.
John Lopez.
They were right there. She needed to hit her vault. She was the final vaulter because that was her strength, as I mentioned earlier. In the team competition, the stadium was going nuts.
Of the individual all-around, and the Americans could lose the team gold to Russia. A 9.493. We've had one more Russian go. So Kerri Strug, it is up to her. If she can score 9.493 and to see her parents in the stands or better, then she will win the team gold for the USA. She's the last to go. She's the only one who can do it.
She will also perform the same vault we just saw Moceanu sit down 2 in a row on.
Oh! 3 falls in a row for the Americans.
This is scary.
She is limping. Kerri is hurt.
Oh, this could be really bad news, John.
Kerri Strug is in trouble. She just stumbled there. She either turned her ankle.
Falls short just like Moceanu. I don't know the last time Kerri Strug did something like that. This is her event.
Her first score, 9.162. Not to do. She will go when she is ready. Kerri Strug is hurt. She is hurt badly.
Well, John, we saw her limping after the first vault.
She has either twisted her ankle or something worse.
Coincidentally, I was right by the landing of the vault, about 8 or 9 rows up, where my press seat was. And this is kind of gross, but I could actually hear when she hurt herself. Not necessarily like a crack or anything, but, you know, the thump and the kind of the way she, you know, she's exhaled and screamed a little bit and all that.
Back to Linda Wyatt. So I'm curious, like, was the crowd worried? Like, what was the vibe? Like, when she collapsed?
We kind of thought she was injured because she sort of limped off of the mat. And then Bela, who's the husband, the guy coach, he kind of grabs her and he quickly gets her to sit down. And then she's kind of like down in a pit. The floor's a little elevated, and so both of the coaches are talking to her. And then it comes time for the final thing. And she gets up and we can see her foot's wrapped. And like I said, it got quiet. Now, I don't know if it really was quiet. I don't know if the music stopped, but for me, and she's there and she's kind of standing there and she's sort of hobbling just to start to go and kind of does a turn, whatever the thing is, or she nods or whatever to go. And she starts running. And it's this huge, long distance, so fast. She's right in front of us. And it's like, shh. And then she does the vault, hits the ground, and then she like immediately brings up her foot and then kind of brings it down again. She's grimacing, like really bad. And she holds her hand up and we're cheering. I mean, it was, and I have chill bumps right now. I mean, they were tied with the Russians and she beat them. And once again, it's the Russians, it's the Soviets, it's our enemy. You have to have been in the Cold War. I don't know how old you are. It was just everybody's quiet and then cheer. Everybody were on their feet. The coaches came up to her. She was crying. She was in pain.
She hurt herself on the first vault. Probably the last thing she should have done was vault again, but she did, and now she is in a lot of pain.
The amazing thing about it, though, John, she raised her hands overhead, her head, she finished the vault.
Standing on one leg.
John Lopez.
Well, when she landed, I actually thought she didn't land it because the judges are only supposed to score what they see in the vault and in the landing and in the technique and in the difficulty of the trick. They're supposed to ignore everything before in the run-up and everything after they land their vault. But she landed the vault, and if you look at the video, she landed the vault perfectly, but then immediately kind of fell back and started hunching her way back because she was in so much pain. In real time, I thought, oh, crap. She fell and she didn't land it, but she did land it. It just happened so fast. She nailed that vault perfectly.
We have got to find out if she's a 9-7-1-2. She has done it. Kerri Strug has won tonight. She was there for Bella, for her team, for her country, and for herself. Kerri Strug.
The girls run up. They carry her off, I think. Bella, the husband with the big mustache, he carries her off. And it's like, yay, we win. How about that?
She did it, and that secured the gold medal for the U.S. in that competition, which was the first time they'd ever done it in history. I watched it live on TV, and it was, I mean, you can't write things like that. It was amazing. Really, really amazing.
That was the moment that kind of got her at the front of the world and kind of made her the face of that team.
When I sat down at the beginning of the evening, if I had known that it was going to come down to one vault and, all the money or nothing, maybe I would have talked my way to a little bit closer environment or something, but I didn't know. And I was happy to feel the space that night rather than to try to, corral it into something that I wanted it to be. And, it's like a big game of poker, I guess. You play with what you have and you make the best hand you can make, given the cards you're holding. And sometimes that means you have to change the machine you're working with, and then you have to change that machine that you're thinking with. And you've got to conform to whatever environment you're in. And that night, it wasn't going to be about me getting a cover shot for Sports Illustrated, right?
Well, it's almost better. You were just there,
Look, if you're with me and I don't have a camera, that means I really want to be there for you, right? So that was one of those nights where it wasn't quite that extreme. I was still shooting, I was still working, and I still have photos, but it wasn't I was exhausted. You're talking about working all day and editing all night, day after day after day after day. And then you've got this event that, you're sitting down for in a seat and you just kind of want to, chill.
If you wanted to see the Olympics, you had to tune in when it was on at home and watch it on your TV and immerse yourself in it. And it only happened every 4 years, and you couldn't just Google Olympic gymnasts and watch something on your phone or on your computer. It was like this rare moment of being able to see these amazing athletes compete. So, yeah, I miss that. I miss watching the Olympics like that.
Well, the interesting thing for me was the next day, keep in mind, I told you she didn't have an agent, she was just sort of doing it because she loved it. And I'm covering track and field the next day at the Atlanta Olympic Stadium. And all of a sudden, this was kind of early cell phone days. So they had those press phones at various points in the press area. And the lady comes down the aisle and says, John Lopez. They're kind of looking for me. And I raise my hand. She says, you have a call. And so they gave me the phone. And it was Melanie Strug, Kerri's mom, and she's almost hysterical. She's like, John, you can you please help us? I don't know what to do. We have 262 messages on our hotel phone, and it's, Good Morning America and the Today Show and nighttime talk shows and book people and agents and all this. I was like, man, that's, obviously that's nuts. I said, well, let me see what I can do. And I called Lee Steinberg, who was really one of the few agents that I knew real well. And Lee Steinberg was a football agent. He was a super agent. They were actually making the movie about him. Jerry Maguire at the time. And so I called Lee and I told him the whole story. And in typical super agent form, he goes, I'll be there tomorrow. So he flew from LA to Atlanta. And long story short, from there, just kind of, pointed him in the right direction and ended up getting taken care of.
We were told, the world's coming to Atlanta. And I don't think the world came. I mean, there were a lot of people from Atlanta, but I don't know the results of it. I do know that after the Olympics left, there were all these shows, all these stores open up that sold the Olympic stuff. Like we got Olympic track jackets. We've got all hats, sweatshirts, pens, all this stuff. Oh, the pins, the trading pins. We just have tons of stuff we bought from those stores that were like 90% clearance.
Because they didn't sell enough of them.
Yeah.
This is Kerri Strug, in her own words, after the 1996 Olympic Games, appearing on Jay Leno.
How you doing? Are you a little nervous?
Yes, I'm a little bit nervous. It's not every day I get to be on Jay Leno show.
No, but how can you be nervous here when you're in front of the entire planet? Even now with this Martian thing, even other planets are watching. This can't be. That must have been the most nerve-wracking. I mean, I can't imagine the tremendous pressure. Do you just have a great sense of relief now?
Well, I'm glad the Olympics are over and I came away with a gold medal. My team and I worked really hard, and we went in with the mission.
Hey, how is your leg? Is it okay?
Well, it's doing much better. I've undergone a lot of physical therapy.
Yeah.
And with time, I think it's going to heal fine. I'm going home to Tucson on Saturday, and I'm going to get it checked out by my own doctor, and we'll see.
Now, what is the exact injury? What did you do? Did it break?
No, it didn't break. We got x-rays taken right after the competition, and there was nothing that showed up. But they think I hurt some of the ligaments. Maybe there's a partial tear, and I sprained it, is what they said.
But besides feeling it, you heard it just kind of...
Yeah, after the first vault, I heard it crack. But in gymnastics, you hear a lot of cracks and pops.
Yeah, I just get that all the time. Well, tell me about the vault now. You did the first one. Did you have to do the second one? I mean, I wasn't quite sure. Didn't you have enough points?
Well, at the time, the Russians were still on the floor exercise, and the vault runs a lot faster. And we couldn't know for sure if we had won the gold or not. It was a real quick decision, and Bella told me, you got to do it. And, Dominic Moceanu, my teammate before me, fell on both vaults, and I fell on my first one, so it wasn't looking very good for the U.S.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of at the end, it was all slipping away, so I decided, you've trained so hard for this for so long, and you're perfectly capable of doing this vault. Just gut it together and try one more time.
So I was watching a Jay Leno clip of Kerri Strug after she won, and everyone in the country's going crazy. And one quote kind of took me aback, which said something to the effect of we didn't know exactly what the outcome would be. Would we have won if I hadn't have vaulted? So I did it.
Yeah.
And then the story I've been hearing throughout the past 48 hours is Kerri won the gold for the Americans. And I just would love to get some clarity on that. I'm going to just read you a little piece of the Washington Post article from 1996 that I felt solidified it, but kind of confused me more. So it says, in the end, the U.S. team would not have needed Strug's second vault, which was scored at 9.712 to claim the gold medal. Their margin of victory over second-place Russia, 389.225 to 388.404, was so large that Moceanu's score would have put them over the top, even without Strug's vault. The final Russian competitor on the floor exercise would have had to score an almost unthinkable 9.972 to give her team the gold. Can you explain that to me?
I think there's a couple of things to say. One, I don't know that they would have had that level of information on the floor in the moment because everybody's competing at the same time. So the U.S. is going on vault while Russia is on floor. Also, vault goes by a lot faster than 5 or 6 longer floor routines. So vault usually finishes first. So my guess is it's not like Russia had competed, finished all their routines, all the scores are in, and the U.S. would have known exactly what they needed down to the, 10th of a point or whatever on vault to win. So my guess is they didn't have that level of information in the moment. And it was very obvious she really hurt herself when she landed that first vault. I think just the adrenaline, and you're at the Olympics and she's kind of walking back to try to go again. And you can see her limping back and trying to shake it off and psych herself up. And I just think probably for her in that moment, she's thinking, I have to land my vault. I'm not going to let my team down after all this training. And there's kind of no way she's not going to go do that vault unless she really, really physically couldn't walk or something. I just think as an athlete, that's at that level, that's what you're thinking.
I kind of mentioned in the beginning, and I just say like, this isn't what this episode is about.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to ask about the Karolis and stuff, but I am genuinely curious, like now that the culture has changed since Simone Biles came out and took a break because of her mental health. Mm-hmm. Do you think it was worth it for Kerri Strug to do that? First question. Second question, what do you think it would look like in 2024?
It's interesting. I mean, I think really Kerri Strug is the only person that can answer that first question of, is it worth it for her to do it? My guess, if I can be so bold, is she would say she doesn't regret that. I mean, you just have to understand, her whole life is leading up to this moment. So I think you're going to do everything you possibly can and have a feeling like I'm not going to have any regrets, even if I might get injured, What would it look like in 2024 is a really interesting question, because I do feel like there's been really positive conversations around mental health for athletes. And, what happened with Simone Biles last Olympics was shocking, but also really amazing that she was able to be so open about what was happening for her and talk about it. I don't know. I guess you could look at the Kerri Strug thing and think, from my point of view, watching it and being an athlete myself, I felt like I understood her decision as an athlete in that moment. Her coach was standing there saying, you can do it, and kind of egging her on and psyching her up. But I also think she would have made that decision just as an athlete at that level. But I don't know.
I'm not twisting your word or anything. I think that that's sort of my conclusion.
No, I know. I mean, it is a question though, are athletes being pushed too far is the sort of question, right? And I think there's a fine line where you have to have coaches and parents, frankly, that are supporting and pushing athletes, but also there has to be a sense within that you still have a voice as an individual. And that if something is affecting your mental health, you need to feel safe, whether it's talking to your parents or frankly, I think you should be able to talk to your coach. That coach should be a person who is going to push you, is going to make you work as hard as you need to work to achieve what you want to achieve, but should also be someone that you can go to if something isn't working. But also talking about some of the things we've been talking about of, how hard are they pushed? Is there a place for them to work with their mental health within their sport? And I think a lot of changes are happening that are really positive, but it's also really sad that the sport has kind of been tainted. And now anytime you talk to people about gymnastics, they're sort of like, oh, well, you're going to be abused if you become a gymnast, or you're going to have an eating disorder if you become a gymnast. And it's sad. For me personally, gymnastics was my everything. For most of my, from the time I was 7 until I stopped competing at 14, and then I started coaching, and it saved me especially as a young teenager when, 13, was the worst year of my life in every aspect of my life, except for gymnastics. That was my refuge. And I had my friends there, and I had just the discipline of it and the creativity of it and the working hard and competing. it was so good for me and I loved it so much, even though it was hard and it wasn't always perfect. You know, pushing yourself and challenging yourself is such a positive thing.
Yeah, I just don't want to miss that, you know?
The positive piece.
Yeah, or just, yeah.
Nothing is all one thing, right? It's like there's always, it's multifaceted.
You Had to Be There is a Hi Barr production, created by Hi Barr. Today's episode, 1996 Summer Olympics. Kerri Strug wins gold. Was written and hosted by Julia Thompson. Produced by Julia Thompson and Webb Barr. Edit, sound mix, and engineering by Vishal Nayak. Original score by Katherine Lieberson. Artwork created by Dylan Lathrop. Special thanks to our parents, friends, and chosen family. And most importantly, thank you to the artists who have inspired us, because they had to do it.